I ain't had no money, I would sweep the building. Other people would come over and I couldn't pay. We had brooms, so we would all sweep the building. And I would have to tell, like, Anita would come over in her nice shoes, and there were holes in the floor. Lord, she had some nice shoes, and the holes. Anita, watch where you. So the last one I'm gonna talk about is this Milwaukee Art Museum show. They asked me to do the show, Dave the Slave Potter. I wanted to be in conversation with craft labor. I had these slides, did this slide thing, the history of ceramics per India, Japan, China. Made some objects, cute. Gave me an opportunity to like deliver a hymnal, because if the people who I'm interested in knowing about Dave don't go to museums, maybe they look at YouTube. Maybe they'll like hear the music. Maybe they'll come to a concert of the Black Monks of Mississippi, or maybe the Reverend Harris, you know, after John Legend get off stage, Reverend Harris would let the Black monks come and bless the church. But then the coolest part was that it also made room for me to create this Facebook choir. And Dave the Slave Potter, he was like a brand in the 1850s. I wanted to figure out a way to kind of have Dave come current and have Dave embodied through my body. And since what I know is like music and urban planning and a little bit about sculptural devices, I didn't want to leave music out. It's like a whole person, whole work. And so this work that happened over 2 years ended up with this really sweet gospel choir.
Oh, just keep myself my way. Oh, just keep my.
So that's Yao. Chance to like bring all of my other friends in the city who have nothing to do with contemporary art into the conversation of contemporary art. It was a sincere moment where I didn't want to just like cut off my tail, cut off my history with the music scene and the black poetry scene in the city. I wanted all that shit to come to bear on the museum. But you gotta frame that. And so it's like you gotta frame that, right? And so instead of it feeling disjunctive, what it is a whole person. And a whole person is often not just a painter, it's probably also a voyeurist. He probably likes looking at things. But not everything gets framed, and in the modern moment, you just show the painting. But I'm not in a modern moment. This ain't a modern moment. Like, other things are important. And this is the choir. I was a choir director growing up. And it's like that part of my life was so divorced from this activity. I was like, man, I gotta bring this. And like there are gaps in the contemporary art world that nobody can fill except really specific people. And if we could be hot about Iceland, why can't we be hot about like a storefront black church on the west side of Chicago? That if the periphery is actually something that's really fantastic and wonderful, let's embrace that shit. And why should I have to run from these culturally specific parts of myself just because it ain't white, like my sinks? White. People love that white shit. Love it. Those sinks flew. White. So white, but there are some other things that are a little bit dirty that need. Thank y'all.
Talking about your work being about a whole person. several people today. Theaster Gates. But at this point, I'm going to ask Franklin to interject with some thoughts and maybe a little
Actually, I'm gonna
Q&A.
Hi. Actually, I'm gonna run through some images because that's, I guess, what we try to do is make sense of some of what Theaster is talking about, and it's hard because you just made it all make sense. But I'm gonna run through these anyway. I mean, it's funny. I keep going back to my Walter Hopps thing right now and thinking about our job being find the cave, hold the torch, just getting out of the way. So now you're trying to put us in the way, and I knew you were going to do that. So I just want to just run through some images that kind of like come to my mind somewhere along the way of thinking about your work. I guess I was somewhere in that system of curatorial phone tag and whatnot, and started hearing about the work. Have you seen Theaster? Have you met Theaster? You have to meet Theaster. And I know when certain people tell me that, I know exactly what they mean. And when I met you, it all made perfect sense. We have several things in common. So let me just run through these. First off, this image from Dave the Potter. And some of the things I'm thinking about in thinking about the work, shout out to Valerie on Handmade, the performative impulse in art and craft. Rhythm, economics, social sculpture, painting, vernacular performance, American folk, international, relational black aesthetics, ritual, preaching, chanting. This is a piece by Nicole Cherubini. This is a work by Mr. David Hammonds. If you haven't seen that show, Uptown, you better hurry up. It is just not to be missed.
Closest to that. Yeah.
Thinking about the circle, thinking about ring shouts, thinking about the cipher, thinking about the lips that touch these little liquor bottles that have made this sculpture. Obviously, a lot of links. Lee Monaco. Jimmy Durham. I mean, you got a little bit of Duchamp, you can't get around it. Noah Purifoy. Leonardo Drew. Mr. Marta Clark. William Christenberry. And this is somebody, talk about vernacular, talk about very specific American sort of place and time, which really is what the work is so much infused with. I mean, it's something that gets tossed around as a black aesthetic, and I hesitate to even pause on that because it is so much bigger than that, which is why I think the Christenberry is a perfect place to talk about that. Yeah, you could look at Walker Evans in a very similar light. Sanford Biggers, straight up contemporary, talked about ritual, dance, movement. And one of the things that I think that hit me first, because one of the things that hit me first about the work was the shoe shine stands. And this idea that we can't just make work to sit there and do nothing. It has to at least suggest conceptually something else. There is this history of utilitarian work that I think is a part of not just African sculpture, but a more global sculpture. It does something. Joseph Boyes, social sculpture. And Jimmy Baldwin, because I don't know what it is, but obviously those ties to chanting, to preaching, and to the church are all there. So those are just some images I wanted to share just from a curatorial point of view, and I look forward to talking.
Thank you, Franklin. I think that was actually really helpful. And I actually maybe want to start with the very basic question that you got to in your presentation. And I think it's a question of, in your presentation, Franklin and Theaster, you talked a little bit